Okay, we will call to order our Committee of the Whole meeting and start by recognizing that we are meeting today on the unceded territories of the Hupachesit and Sishat First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to be added by committee members? Seeing none. Any late items from our corporate officer?
None.
Then would somebody like to move approval of our agenda? Moved by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, and we have adoption of minutes. The minutes from the meeting held at 4 p.m. on November 21st, 2022. Move to adopt by Councillor Solda. Seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the minutes, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. No delegations, no unfinished business today, so we'll move right into our staff reports. Item number 1, we have the 2023 to 2027 financial plan timeline.
All right. Thank you, Chair Minions. So what I wanted to do today is just present just a timeline to Council. You know, we have a new council here, so we've done this process over the last couple of years since I have been in this role. So I just would like to go quickly with the timeline for the financial plan. So in front of you there is the roadmap that we have. This is a nice visual for staff to present to council and the public to allow them to understand where we need to go over the next few months to get the financial plan adopted and meet our statutory deadlines. This visual was also included in the City Connect and will be used in other information that we send out to the public just to create that awareness. As you can see, over the next few months, it looks like there's quite a bit of time that we have, but the timeline is very important. We have to complete this by May 14th. And this is a deadline for the province, and it just sets us up for our tax bylaw and our requisitions that we need to have out in a timely fashion. In slide 2, as I mentioned, May 14th is the deadline, with a target adoption of the financial plan targeted for April 11th, and that would allow us to bring forward the tax rates bylaw on the 11th also, and then with the adoption before the end of April, and have that at the April 24th meeting. To achieve this, we do need to meet those timelines that we have in the financial plan. With that, our first budget discussion will be on February the 6th. At that time, what we do is normally bring forward a high-level overview of the financial plan to allow council to understand what the tax rate is, understand what the impacts that we are seeing as far as costs, any of our collective agreement requirements, our inflationary lifts on our contracts and agreements and policies that we have. And then at that time, there is no details provided to council, but what it is just that summary of the financial plan. So we get the opportunity to sit in here and talk about what is really influencing that financial plan. And this will come forward with no changes to service levels. This is the service levels that we are currently providing the city. So then we can dive into the financial plan throughout the financial planning process through the meetings following. So we'll bring forward that first reading recommendation at the February 13th meeting. And then at the COW, we'll have that detailed discussion about what's in the financial plan once you have had the opportunity to look at those details. And then every year we do need to undertake a public engagement process, allow the public to review and have input on their financial plan. And we've done the e-town hall over the past few years, and especially during COVID, that was beneficial for us to have that public engagement, that opportunity. So that is scheduled for a committee of the whole meeting on March the 6th. Here's a more detailed timeline that we are looking at, and I'll kind of highlight some of the meeting dates that you'd like to keep in mind as we go through. As I mentioned, details are not provided on the February 6th meeting. We'll go through a PowerPoint and work through that. Some of the things that we are facing right now is the inflationary increases, and of course the supply management issue that we are having, and a lot of our larger pieces of equipment are a little bit delayed in getting from the suppliers, so we're seeing some cost increases on that front too. Although the details aren't shared, this is a meeting where we can have some discussion and follow-up questions for staff to bring back to council as we go through the financial planning process. In then the February 13th meeting, of course, the full financial plan will be in the agenda. A staff report covering the highlights of that financial plan, some of the key projects that we are bringing forward will be there. And we'll also start to continue the practice of the question and answer sheet. So with that, if there's questions proposed from the public or council, we keep track of that through the budget process to enable that transparency, that continuance of the financial planning questions. So that might not be populated fully for the next meeting, but as we go through the process, we'll populate that as we get the information for council and public. And then on the 21st, the Committee of the Whole, as I mentioned, that's a meeting where I think we can have some discussion about the financial plan, some debates on where we would like to see things go, if that's the opportunity for council to have that fulsome discussion on the financial plan. So there's quite a few opportunities as we go through this, but that's kind of the financial plan date that we've identified as one to really dive into the financial plan for that Committee of the Whole meeting on the February 21st date. And then with the E-Town Hall, again, the public has the opportunity, but they also have the opportunity all the way through. They can pose questions, they can bring forward concerns. So there's always that opportunity as we are going through the financial planning process to have those engagements with our public. So with the meeting, obviously needing to have a recommendation for second and third reading. At second reading, we'd like to lock in that, and then moving forward to the third reading, there shouldn't be any changes. If we do need to make changes at third reading, we would have to rescind that reading and then go back and make those amendments. But when it comes to the financial plan on the 11th, that has to be the final financial plan that we bring forward. There shouldn't be any changes. So obviously we do have some time there. If there is a need to have a special meeting, we can do that. Council can call a special meeting, a special Committee of the Whole meeting. So there is that opportunity if we need to, with the goal of having that financial plan approved by May the 14th. So with that said, I mean, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about the timeline today, and hand it over to the committee.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Are there questions from council? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wondering if I can get a copy of that presentation with the dates. That'd be great.
Absolutely. Just
of what you got there. So, and the only other question is the final adoption date is April 11th, and that's a Tuesday. Are we having a council meeting on a Tuesday there? The reason why I say that is the 10th is my mother's birthday, so I just want to make sure we're good. So,
I believe that must be the holiday.
Is there a holiday? Is it a? Oh yes. So, oh well. Isn't that nice? Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good eyes, though.
Thank you. Councillor Solda, and then Councillor Patola.
Madam Mayor, I'm just kind of curious to know, how are we publicizing this to the public, and what sources are we using and to get that information out to the public?
Yeah. Chair Minions, what we have is the City Connect. We have that. We've advertised already on our social media as far as the dates. As we go through, we will also advertise the different opportunities, especially the E-Town Hall, because that is our public engagement on our social media. And I imagine that we would probably do radio ads as we've done in the past too. So just allow the public at every level to have that, and advertisements in the paper too. So.
And also, are we going to put it on when I go into my, on the internet and I type in Port Alberni agendas and that, it's not on there. So I'm just kind of curious to know, are we going to put a big link where it'll give us dates and stuff like that?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we can definitely add that. There's probably just a little oversight on our part, but we'll make sure it's in there.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Mealy, happy birthday to your mother on April the 10th. And to the director, I too would like a copy of those dates. So I think we've canvassed that pretty thoroughly, but I just wanted to throw my voice in there. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dame.
Will those be council of the whole meetings, meaning that they are at 6 o'clock in the evening, or will they, or is that not an across the board?
Andrew, do you want to speak to which ones are regular and which ones
Yeah,
are?
so if we go back to here, the times, the dates and times are there. So the next committee of the whole meeting will be at 6 p.m. next week. And then, of course, the regular council meetings are at 2 p.m. So any committee of the whole will be 6, and of course, regular council meetings 2 p.m. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2. We have a report from the Manager of Planning on development procedures. Welcome, Marianne.
Good evening. So before the committee this evening is the consideration of the development procedures bylaw. And in your report, you have as part of your report, there's an attachment of the draft development procedure bylaw. So the purpose of tonight's presentation is that the committee receive the report as information and provide feedback on the proposed development procedures bylaw number 5076. So staff is seeking some feedback on the proposed development procedures to inform the draft bylaw. So a little bit of background. The reason we're before you today is it's about streamlining our development approval processes and aligning with the provincial government's initiatives in order to align with delivering greater housing supply. So Bill 26 streamlined a lot of the local government development procedures by its adoption in November 25, 2021. So some of the key things that is important to note is that the province delegated authority to councils to delegate minor development variance permits to staff, and it also requires no public notice, and we are obligated to outline how we define a minor development variance permit. They removed the requirement for a public hearing if the zoning aligns with the official community plan and the land use designation. As you know, we've had a few of those over the past or the previous year, because it was 2022, and we had to do a notice, come back to council, and there was a little bit of, I would say, a little more complex. What this allows us to do is actually give a notice prior to coming to council, so we can get engagement prior to coming to council. You have that engagement, and it's all built into the process when you consider that rezoning. So that's a streamlining again. And it's also modernizing of public notices. So part of Bill 26 was that it looked at the fact that currently under the LGA, you're always obligated to advertise in a newspaper. So now they're giving you options and choices, which includes social media, websites and newsletters and direct mail out. So that's built into this development procedures bylaw as well. So we have more flexibility and we don't have to advertise in the paper. It's an either or. And so that's laid out in the development procedures as well. And then also that council can delegate under section, they can delegate under the Local Government Act and also the Community Charter powers to approve an issuance of development permits that are issued under section 490 of the Local Government Act. So that's also being proposed in this draft development procedures bylaw. And in part 14 of the Planning Land Use Division of the LGA, it also outlines the requirements for a development procedures bylaw. Currently, we don't have a full development procedures bylaw. We have a development application notice bylaw, which we would need to repeal and replace with this new robust bylaw that would align with all the requirements under the LGA. So I'll start off with the first point about the delegation of minor development permits. We have to define minor. In the definition in the bylaw, we have used 25%. It can range anywhere from 10% to just less than 50%. 25% would allow staff to bring forward those applications that have hardships or adjustments that you have seen before you on quite a few occasions, which could be dealt with staff, and because they're considered minor in nature. We would be looking at setbacks, height, lot coverage, and lot frontages. Hardships is also defined as, like, if there's an environmental constraint on the site, us being able to do some adjustments and variations within that 25%. If it's over 25%, it would come to council. Delegation of development permits. Again, what happens with a development permit is the development permit area is defined in the OCP. It's approved by council. Then those guidelines are what staff has to follow in order to move forward with the development permit issuance and approval. There's also technical permits, which we will be looking at in the future as we move forward, and also in alignment with the requirements under the provincial government. They mainly pertain to flood permits and things to do with environment. So those are other things that technically we have to follow provincial government. So we're following provincial government guidelines and their approval process. So we're kind of working in coordination with them. So it just becomes more of a matter of making sure those technical permits meet the requirements that are laid out in provincial legislation. And I also wanted to note that the development permits can be reconsidered at any time by the applicant and come back to council. Other items that are in the draft development procedures bylaw is third party, outlining the need for third party review. For example, we do not have a registered professional biologist on staff, so we would retain one. It also allows us the ability to charge the fees for those services back to the developer, for example. So it also helps with some cost recovery. And the other thing is the consideration or appeals process is also outlined within the draft development procedures bylaw. So for a minor development variance delegation or a development permit, a process is outlined on how the applicant can appeal to the delegation of that authority. It also outlines the processes and the application forms with some charts and step-by-step, which we will then incorporate into updating our web pages and our brochures and our applications. So just looking overall, this will clarify the interpretation application for staff and the public. It responds to Bill 26 and the provincial government's priority to reduce land development application processing time to increase housing supply. And the development procedures bylaw follows council's strategic priorities to provide and maintain quality services. We're going good. I know there, we almost got it. So next steps, I just thought I would outline how this would proceed forward. After the discussion today, we would look at bringing the bylaw back for first, second, and third readings because it's an administrative bylaw. It doesn't require public notice. And then we would then bring it back for adoption of the bylaw. And then the options for council are laid out before you, that you can receive this report for information, provide feedback, or an alternative direction to staff, or take no action. Staff is recommending option number 1. And there's the questions.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I just want to start by saying that I know this is something we've been talking about for a long time, and it's always been challenging to get to it because of the volume of applications that we've had specifically over the last few years in our planning department. So really glad to see this report today, and I think this is a fantastic start to taking some of the excessive process where it's not necessarily beneficial or supporting a bigger goal to bring to council, and being able to streamline processes. So really happy to have this in front of us. Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I totally agree with you, and thank you to the planning department. Just a quick question, is this, when you had that, the city had a meeting at Echo Center and all the contractors and everybody were there, was this the start of it? Is that, or they knew what was going on and all the changes that were coming up?
Through Madam Mayor, to Councillor Solda. No, we didn't talk about this specifically. We have talked in generalities about improving the development process.
Okay.
And there has been conversations about, questions about development permits, for example, because a lot of municipalities already delegate to the Director of Development Services and Manager that authority for the purpose of actually decreasing the processing time, and because it's all lined out in the OCP. But so we have talked about it more in a general sense, but that was not at that one. It was about the step code 3,
Okay.
and how that was going to affect the coming up with the building bylaw that's going to be coming to you shortly with
Okay.
those updates in it.
Okay, and one more thing. So if it's adopted in March, when does it commence? Would it commence in
Yeah.
March?
As soon as it's adopted, it becomes effective.
Super, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mealy, and then Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Wade. Appreciate the presentation today. First, I'll say having a backlog is a problem. However, it's a good problem to look at, as that means that there's a lot of things happening. So I love the fact we're going to try to streamline it a bit. I guess my question more along the lines is, it's nice to see you using the website, nice to see you using social media. The radio station, is that something we've ever looked into? And the reason why I say that, it's a lot different than it was years ago. You can't, but they'll put everything in their news report on their Facebook page, and they seem to get a lot of views. Is that something we're even able to do? Is that part? Sorry?
Marianne?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Mealy. In here, that is one of the things that if we wanted to do radio advertisement, we could. We'd have to look at our fees and charges and figure out what those costs are so we can cost recover.
Sorry, just follow up. Sorry, and I apologize. Just it wasn't for advertising, just more along the lines of giving them as news, and so they can say, okay, this is what's happening. Here's a link to the website. But like I said, a lot of the times, even if they don't put it on the radio station and during the radio time, they'll still put it on their Facebook page. So I just kind of.
Yeah, so
I'm not saying there's some free advertising there, but
there's a little bit of free
a little bit of free
there,
advertising
though.
there. Yeah, maybe if the peak's nice. So.
So I interview with Dave Weavichar after every council meeting, and he asks specific questions. However, we can also suggest specific things from our meetings that we want to let the community know about. So it's a great way to get the community talking, and follow that up with full picture information from us. So yeah, absolutely. So I can make sure that I connect with David on this. Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through to Manager Wade, and for the consideration of all council. I haven't read the bylaw in depth, although I have read the bylaw, but it takes 3 or 4 passes for me in any event. I am concerned about the delegation of our entire responsibility, even on minor variances, and I wonder if there'd be any consideration either through your department manager or from council to be interested in adding an exception clause where authority is delegated, that there would be an exception for any event should any one councillor determine that a hearing is required or the decision of council is required. Just envisioning that there may be some situation that comes up that might be fits the definition of a minor nature, but might be of more importance to the public.
Thank you. I think that's a great question. So there is the appeal process laid out in the public. Marianne, are there examples of communities that have almost not an appeal, but an opt-in for a council?
Through your mayor, Madam Mayor, to also Councillor Patola, the intention of Bill 26 is to delegate that authority to have that certain discretion, and that's why they've requested that the minor variance be defined and that the terms are good, and that's the way to go and measure it. Otherwise, it's going back into that it's not giving clarity to the person who's applying or to staff. And so the reconsideration clause is why that's there. So if the applicant didn't agree with it, or the decision that was being made, they could then just reach out to the Director of Corporate Services, make an appeal, or come to council.
Thank you, and I'll just add as well to that. Of course, this report today is for information, and as Marianne said, for feedback on direction from the committee, obviously, to council. This is the kind of suggested list of what could be delegated, and up 25%. As we know, that could be scaled up or down. Development permits, for instance, we could delegate all of them. We could delegate certain areas of the community. We could exempt certain areas of the community. We could delegate anything under a certain development value. So this is really the time for council to give that feedback if we'd like to see changes to that, and anything is possible. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for bringing this forward. I think it's really going to streamline processes, shorten up timelines for people in the community, and much less work for the building department. You don't have to do a report, bring it forward to council, and much less work for council as well for these little minor variances. And I think we have to put trust in the expertise of our staff to do what they do best. Thank you.
Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to agree with Deb, Councillor Haggard, sorry. I think that this is a good opportunity for us to, obviously there has been a struggle the last while to keep up with the amount of we're just work that's coming in, the amount of development that's happening, and I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to move some of that extra work off of the desk and stay focused on the larger things. So, just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thanks. And I think the intent definitely is to make sure that where process is not necessarily adding, to the overall kind of success of a project, where it can be delegated and it makes sense to do that. But I do think that there is a fine balance between delegating for, efficiency and over-delegating potentially. My perspective is that I see this as very timely, given that we are underway on our OCP, where we will be implementing new policies. I think for a council to delegate authority without really good specific instruction and policies in place of what what we want everything to be evaluated on is not necessarily the right delegation. And I know we've talked a lot about a form and character bylaw and really intentionally creating the community that we want to create. I think as we continue to get closer to our OCP being created and we start to adopt new policies, council and the community are really giving that very clear direction to staff on what we want. And then I think that the best thing we can do is empower staff to be able to go and actually implement that direction. So I think this makes a lot of sense. And I think especially given that we are where we are on the OCP, being able to delegate the authority with very clear instruction of what we want to see through the OCP makes a lot of sense. And I'm not sure if I had other. Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Madam Mayor, could I have just like a couple of examples of where this this proposed 25% might come into play, just to clarify exactly what this would look like in practice?
So, for example, last council meeting we had Cedarwood, and Cedarwood had a height variance, for example, that would have met this, so that's an example. There was lots of ones where we had to do some twiggings on or variances on the lot frontages to meet zoning that has come forward to council, and so that would be another example. Parking too is another example where if there's a certain reduction of parking in some of the applications that have come forward, they would fit that 25%. Some may not. Cedarwood would be probably just a little over on that parking variance, and then the other one that was less, I was going to say, is probably Athol probably would have been fallen into that category. So there's a few. It just, you know, there's a few examples. I would say probably since I've been here, there's probably been at least 8 that could have been handled this way.
And just for clarity, because you mentioned Athol Street, that was a rezoning to a comprehensive development zone. So that rezoning still would have come to council. It just, had it been properly zoned and just needed a variance, the variance may not have come to council if it fell within that.
Yeah.
And to add to that, I remember I remember 2 reports at 2 separate council meetings that had to come to council for an already constructed house that was, that the soffits were like 4 inches over where they were supposed to be for a side setback. I remember another one where someone had torn off their front porch, wanted to rebuild the exact same front porch, and it was a foot over the front setback. And so, you know, I think there's big and small examples of where this could apply. Some of those small examples, I think we all recognize that doesn't need to come to a council meeting, but it's a comfort zone of some of the bigger things, like, you know, maybe, and I don't know if it's possible to set more specifically what type of variances, like maybe we're comfortable with parking and not height for multifamily buildings. I think if council wants to give some of that direction, or it just is comfortable with everything, that's fine, but I believe it's within our discretion what we want to delegate and what we don't want to delegate. So, great question, Dustin. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering, an example I can sort of get my hands around. I'm just wondering if this is applicable. So if, for example, let's say a building was being considered and they were, by the current requirements, expected to provide, for example, 25 parking spots, but plans could only accommodate 24, so there'd be 1 less. That might be something that this could apply for. On the other hand, if they only could provide 10 parking spots, that would probably come to council. Is that sort of?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a comment in that in my past life, I once made the mistake of responding to something that I thought was incidental by saying to the person that presented it to me, "Who cares?" And they responded to me by saying, "I do." And so I learned from that really nothing is incidental if someone cares. And I think it's incumbent upon council to listen to the concerns of the community. And I certainly am in favor of streamlining a process, especially a permit process, so that we can get on with the economic development of the city and the benefit to all citizens. However, even a 4-inch overlap or a 4-foot height restriction or 1 parking space may be more important to certain citizens than a lack of 10 parking spaces, depending upon the particular incident. And we need to remember that we're planning a bylaw that is going to be in effect for potentially a long time, 40 or 50 years. And we can't presume to know every particular set of circumstances that will come under application to this bylaw. So again, totally in favor of streamlining the process, both for our staff and for ourselves and for the public. Just again, wanting to reiterate that there's should be some small measure of control retained in the case of things that might not seem important to us but do to other people.
Thank you, Marianne.
Yes, I just wanted to highlight to the committee that at any time you can, once this is adopted, we can revisit this in a year. And if things aren't working the way council would like it, we can definitely amend it. It's not, bylaws can be amended at any time. And yes, you know, we can, if we try something and there's things that we discover that aren't working, happy to look at it and evolve it and address it too. So I just wanted to let the committee know that's an option.
Thank you. In following up on that question, so of course we always have the option to amend or rescind a bylaw. There's an appeal process, assuming if staff declines something that the applicant would have a method to appeal to council. Is there a method, or could the same method be used for a member of the public if staff approves something to request an appeal?
That's a very good question, and I'm happy to look into that. And I could definitely get back on that.
Yeah.
And just so the committee knows, this has all been vetted by our legal too. So this is based on best practices and legal as well. Just wanted to let everybody know.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Okay. So, council, is there any specific direction that anyone would like to suggest today? And just, noting that today is not our last opportunity by any means. So, Marianne, I think you showed at one of your slides that this would come back for first and second reading in February.
Yep.
So more opportunity for council to give direction if needed for amendments. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are we asking for any changes to what we've been, or do we suggest any changes to what we see here today?
Yeah, I think if there's the committee today cannot make any formal decisions, but we can make recommendations to council. We can also give feedback to staff, and we can do that, on a one-off or consensus, or if we have something that we want to be explored, then we can give that feedback today. Go ahead.
May I? Thank you, Madam Mayor. So part 2-1 or 2.1/K, I guess, grant an exemption from a floodplain specification pursuant to Section 524(7) Local Government Act. I would like to see that taken out, Madam Mayor, as I believe, first of all, it's not a floodplain, it's a tsunami inundation zone now, so I guess if the terminology is correct, I think that's what it should be. But I think that anything to do with any exemptions within the tsunami inundation zone should come to council.
Thank you. I see definitely some general agreement on that, and I don't think that we need to. I don't think that we need to vote on that direction today. I think we can pass it along to staff. Staff can explore what is and is not done in other communities, what the risks and benefits might be, and bring that back to council for formal decision and direction. Marianne?
I just wanted, on that note, we're provincially regulated on what we can and cannot do with that floodplain. That's why that language is in there on the suggestion of our legal, but I'm happy to bring back the rationale in a report to you.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So not to reiterate my suggestion for some sort of veto power, because I certainly take, Madam Mayor, your comments into consideration, that there is an appeal process for the applicant, and if there was one for the general public on the alternate side. I'm not looking for any particular veto power of council, but something that addresses those issues, and I hope that Manager Wade has heard the comments and concerns about that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if, I don't think you spoke about it specifically in the presentation. I think it was in the report, though, about reporting to council, or maybe it was a comment from Scott earlier, but I think there was a process of quarterly reports on variances that, or development permits that are issued, so that council stays informed, and, albeit after the fact, but just for keeping that information flow. Could you speak to what staff is envisioning for that?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I believe what you're looking at was in the procedures outlining how we report back on things. And yes, so we could bring back and on a quarterly basis the development variance permits that we have done as far as the minor delegation. We can totally do that and be part of that reporting.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Not seeing any other comments. Again, just when this comes to council next time, there'll be more opportunity if anyone reflects and has additional thoughts. And I think that just important to note that this is a shift for what we have done in the past. And, delegating of authority that is council's authority, I think has to come with a lot of consideration. And we don't need to, our planning department is busy, but we don't need to rush if we're not fully comfortable. So if we wanted to scale back the variance amount, or we wanted to exclude anything, then I think that's certainly, this is the time, and when it comes back to us next time, the time to make sure we're super comfortable with that delegation. Marianne?
Madam Mayor, I just wondered, could the committee be more comfortable that we bring this back to the next committee of the whole meeting? Like, I'm happy to adjust the schedule if that is what the committee is seeking.
I personally think this is fine to come to a council meeting, to the next council meeting that you're on track for. And even if we receive it and aren't comfortable, giving first and second reading, I think we can have that conversation at a council meeting.
Okay.
If everyone's comfortable with that. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. And on to item number 3, report from the Manager of Planning, Zoning Amendment Bylaw.
So before you today is the proposed draft zoning bylaw. So the purpose of today's presentation is that the committee receive the staff report and the draft zoning bylaw number 5074, and that the committee supports staff to initiate a community engagement on the proposed bylaw content changes prior to the zoning bylaw number 5074 being considered by council. As you will remember, at December 12th, 2022, we introduced the content changes for the proposed zoning bylaw 5074, and we provided a summary table that was dated December 5th. And in your report, you have an updated version that reflects January 26, 2023. At that meeting, we talked about the big moves, administration, definitions, establishment of the zones, general regulations, and housekeeping. Just to refresh, I thought I'd just run through what we talked about briefly. We talked about the big moves, which was bringing in accessory dwelling units. We talked the little picture about how those accessory dwelling units could be laid out on a lot with a single family dwelling. And it talks about the primary unit and the accessory dwelling unit and where they could be located on the lot, so that it incorporates dealing with garden suites, along with secondary suites, along with carriage houses. We talked a little bit about the density bonusing and the changes we're making on that, taking it out of the specific zoning into moving it into general requirements. With the density calculations, we redefined how we're going to do density calculations, where the low density would be units per hectare, and the higher density commercial industrial manufacturing would remain as the floor area space ratio. We talked about daycares being permitted in all zones, and then we talked about some of the lot frontages and coverages that needed to adjust in the zones to accommodate our proposed accessory dwelling units. So just quickly, I briefly ran over that. This is just a picture to explain FAR, which is the floor area ratio, and then the density calculations, and then the definitions, the types of changes we made in your summary of the zoning proposed changes. There's a table, and it talks about if it's new, if it's deleted, if it's been updated and modernized and clarified, so that you understand the rationale in those definitions. The establishment of zones, we made some changes there. Again, just the daycare permitted in all zones, we're moving stories and just using height, so we can avoid, it was really confusing using 1.5, 2.5, or just using height. That's very straightforward. It's very hard to define a half story. Then the naming convention to modernize it, to detached or semi or multi rather than family dwelling. We've talked about the increase in lot coverage in the R2-1 zone to allow and support developments. You have seen some of those variances coming to council. And so this is to help avoid some of those variances so that we can actually promote gentle infill, and the same as with the R3 zone. So in the secondary suites under general regulation, we've removed the owner occupied and replaced with principal dwelling to be permanently occupied, so that you could have a renter or an owner in there, but somebody who's there on a permanent basis. And then also that we've added in the definition about single real estate entities, so that if you had a duplex and you wanted a secondary suite, it must be, as per the BC Building Code, a single real estate entity to have that. So that's another way of gentle infill, and it's the same for townhouses as well. Then we talked about the garden suites and the carriage houses, and that you cannot have another accessory dwelling unit on a lot. It has to be either a secondary suite, a carriage house, or a garden suite. The garden suites and the carriage houses cannot be located in the front yard. They will be in the rear yard. We're adjusting those setbacks to accommodate that. And the maximum height for a garden suite is basically 8 meters, and it has to be less than the principal building, but for a carriage house, it would be below the principal, but because it could be a 2-story, we're allowing for that. So those are the two differences between the carriage and the garden, and it can exceed 40% of the principal dwelling unit.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was actually wondering if we could ask questions as we're going
Oh, sure.
along. That's what so I just wanted to bounce.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bounce back to the previous, removing the owner-occupied phrase, does that sort of mean, so if, say you got a house with a main living area plus a basement suite, they could both be rentals, rather than one having to be the owner?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Please just stop me if you want any questions. I'm just motoring through now that my wand works. Okay, I shouldn't have said that. There we go. Okay, and then the housekeeping is just about references to the LGA and community charter, formatting and modernizing the language. And so the next steps would be that if the committee is supportive of community engagement and taking the draft bylaw out, we would then do community engagement in February, and then we would bring that engagement back, and then we would inform council if there was any revisions based on those engagement, and then we would have council consider the first and second readings of the bylaw. Then we move to a public hearing and third reading, and then we'd have to take this to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure because it affects a large area, and so we'd have to get that approval and then the adoption. So the timeline is hopefully to be adopted in May. And then the options before the committee is to receive this report and provide us feedback, and the committee to support staff to initiate community consultation prior to the bylaw being considered by council. It could give us alternative direction or take no action. Staff are recommending 1 and 2. And questions?
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you again. Not specifically to this, because I gather this is like an overall zoning change, but I had a few questions if it doesn't derail the whole thing. Just some topics within zoning itself. I was wondering if you could answer me. Like you didn't mention parking spaces, so I'm assuming this isn't really what we're talking about here, but if, say we have a building that has to have a delegated amount of parking spaces, are we working on changing that at all, other than through the variance stuff we were just talking about?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Douglas, yes, that'll be part of the comprehensive zoning bylaw, which will follow this updated one. Yes, it is very much on our radar.
Okay, so that probably apply to my next question or two. For example, in those parking spaces, providing a certain number of electric charging outlets. Is that also on our radar?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and then third one, I'm doing really good here, is bicycle racks. Is that anywhere on our radar as well?
That is currently in the zoning bylaw, so there's some requirements for that, and we're looking to make that a little more robust.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, any specific feedback or direction council would like to pass along before this goes for community engagement? Councillor Patola.
I just fully support the recommendations of staff, 1 and 2. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on from this item then. Got no correspondence, no new business, so we'll go to question period,
Mayor, just, are we looking for direction in the staff's recommendation was 1 and 2? Are we looking for that to be happening tonight? Okay, sorry. I apologize.
Okay.
Maybe if I may, Madam Mayor, if we can go back, I will, I'll make a motion that we do recommendations 1 and 2.
make a recommendation to council. Perfect.
And to go, and the second one, number 2, was to go to the public engagement. Yes.
Great, thank
Sorry,
you.
thank you.
Would somebody like to second that?
I second it.
Seconded by Councillor Douglas. Great, and seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to question period, which is an opportunity for any members of the public to ask questions. Would anyone like to ask a question? Michael, if you don't mind just introducing yourself, name and address, please.
My name is Michael Moore. My address is 4701 North Park Drive. I specifically came down to this meeting today because you guys were talking about development and zoning. As somebody who is recently going through this process and has, at this point, I'm at 188 days from the submittal of my development permit to hopefully, fingers crossed, my final inspection tomorrow. So 188 days, and there is absolutely no one to blame. Rob has moved heaven and earth, and this could not be done without him and without the fine people working in development and everywhere else. And this is no slight against that process, but as somebody who works in the restaurant and hospitality industry, I travel all around North America. I open restaurants with different restaurant groups, and witnessing the speed and efficiency of inspections and openings that happen in the other communities. For the Alberni Valley to be successful and to capitalize on the interest that has been generated over the pandemic and over the last few years, especially with an innovative and wonderful new council. If we can't capture people coming in and get them to build something fast and quick and efficient, we will lose out on those opportunities. It's not so much a question, it's more of a statement. And you know, this is how effective and efficient we can be as a community will inspire other people to open things. At 188 days, can't say that if I was doing this privately, it would have been available for me to do. And that's about it. So thank you to city and staff for bringing all these wonderful ideas. But
Thanks very much, Michael. And I think you're definitely not alone. I mean, Scott, I think, what was the permit amount that you told me today from 2022, roughly?
In 2022, the city did about $95.5 million in construction value.
Yeah, and I think thinking back to 2020, we were like 15 to 16. So that might have been 2019, but it's up drastically. And we know that that has put significant pressure on staff and our ability to get things out in a timely manner. So where there are things that can be delegated that can save steps in the process, I think it's important that we consider that. And I think there's been some good conversation here today around potentially what to delegate and what not to delegate, and making sure that we still kind of hold that ability to build the community that we want, and sometimes that's just in giving really good instruction and guideline to staff to implement our authority. Would you like to ask a question?
Sure, sort of. Okay. Michael set the precedent. Okay, I don't know if I'm supposed to address you, Madame Mayor, is that right, and City Council?
Yeah, and if you don't mind just stating your name and address so that we have it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lisa Hagan, 414 Johnson Road. I just have questions about the Smart City Challenge. We are involved in that, are we not? I think that was on your website, something to do with the waste. Yes. Is that correct? I'm asking these questions because I have other questions to spin on that question, and I don't want to be.
Scott, are you able to comment on that?
I don't have any direct knowledge about us being in the Smart City Challenge. I'm not familiar with that. I mean, I know we've, over the last couple of years, we've implemented the 3-stream waste, compost, recycling, and garbage.
Okay.
If that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, there's things that cities are adapting, and it says actually, if you look up on the internet, that you guys are involved in that in the Smart City Challenge. And there is, you're supposed to have zero waste is what it says that is supposed to be happening here. In Bowser, let's say they had said something about only being one single, no single vehicles they want to get to. That's where they want to go. And this is all to do with carbon footprint. And what I'm wondering is if we are doing that and we have accepted money for that, because I know that they allot $10 million to cities for these things. And I wondered if we accepted that kind of money for these things. And had we, and if we are involved in the Smart City Challenges, there is also a new thing that is going about, and I'm not sure if it's all real or whether it's not, but I don't know if you've heard about 15-minute cities. Okay, I would like to know if we are adapting 15-minute cities in Port Alberni.
Thank you. So Scott can probably comment at a high level, and possibly Marianne as well. And I think that great questions, and 15-minute city, great concept. This might be something that we have to bring back more information on. When I'm just taking a look, it looks like it's something that the city applied to potentially be a part of in,
Maybe
in
that's
2018.
What it was. Yes, thank you that you applied for it. Sorry.
Yes,
that's
right.
what I was trying to clarify, is if it actually went through, if you took money for it, whether. Okay.
No.
Okay.
But it's on our website under its own page.
Yes,
So
that's why I was like, okay, I better ask
right.
them
And in
before
the
I start
newspaper,
asking weird questions.
For sure. So not a weird question. Appreciate you bringing it up, and Scott can comment, and then it might be something that council wants to explore further information on.
Sure, and we didn't receive any funding from that program.
Okay.
The 15-minute city, that's an idea. We're not following that per se, but we've used that kind of idea. We are currently engaged in our official community plan that we'll discuss with the community a lot of various things about environmental greenhouse gas reductions. Marianne is the lead on that, and she could maybe add to that as well. But
okay.
Not super fully aware of the Smart City program, but we didn't receive funding to that, and we're not following a prescribed thing on that. We are working on the official community plan that covers a great quantity of environmental, housing things, and we're just starting on our policy development there. And I guess I might just ask Marianne just to add a little bit about that, if she could.
For sure. Marianne, if you don't mind coming forward, you guys will have to share the microphone.
Sorry. Oh, yeah, no problem.
Okay. So I quickly looked up your first question.
Okay.
And I'm new, so bear with
Okay.
me.
Right on.
But, so it's about zero waste and our commitments to zero waste.
Right.
And that'll be with the waste collection with our Director of Engineering and Public Works and agreements that we have with the ACRD. So happy to follow up with you on more information on that.
That would be great.
So I can definitely get your name and I'll follow up and I'll get that for you.
Because I'm just trying to have an understanding of what zero waste means, because
Yep.
I eat food and there's waste, and I go to the bathroom and there's waste. So it cannot be zero. So I'm just trying to figure out, because they're doing the carbon taxing on everything, does that mean I'm gonna get taxed and a carbon tax because I don't have zero waste? And that's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to understand what this process is and where our city stands with that. And also with the 15-minute city, because if you have a 15-minute city and you're in your 15-minute allot and you go out and they decide to do your carbon taxing, or you're taking your, like a digital thing of how much carbon you have emitted, well, okay, I have not walked as many times as I'm supposed to, so now I'm not allowed to have a stake because it's too much carbon. I'm wondering where we are with that and if we will ever get there.
So
Because I don't want it.
Marianne?
So I can carry through. So as part of our OCP, we are legislated under the provincial government to have greenhouse gas emission targets to go to what they call net zero by 2042, I want to say. I'll just double check on that. But and so when we go through the OCP, we're going to be doing an engagement process with the community on climate action and talking about targets, what does it mean, how does it impact, and having that discussion with the community. We are a member, I think it was 2009-10 that we actually engaged and signed up for the climate action and have a letter with the province. So we are one of the communities that has agreed to do climate action and the targets. We did originally do what they call community energy emissions inventory, and that was something that was part of the provincial government and talking about emissions and how that was done. And so then we are now going to look at how we're going to move forward and what is our tool we use. A lot of communities use what they call a community energy emissions plan and a climate action plan that deals with resilience and mitigation as well, because of our conditions as far as tsunamis and floodplain and those sorts of things. So these are all things we're going to be talking about in our policy development for the OCP and aligning with our provincial requirements as well.
Okay, so is that brought to the public before that happens? When we sign on to say the climate thing you're talking about, was the public behind that, and did they vote for that, or do they vote for that in the future? If we decide to go to 15-minute cities, will that be voted on by the community, or is it just going to be mandated by the province?
So,
Marianne?
so let's talk 15-minute cities. I know that that has come out of different things, and there's different international cities that have certain requirements that they're doing. What in planning lingo, as I'm going to say, 15 minutes is about walkability and active transports and service as it affects affordability and public health. And those are things that we are going to consider in the OCP because we have consulted with the community, and the community has talked to us about compact communities as a high priority for the city. And so that is coming out for discussion. And we have a Let's Connect PA page that outlines the OCP, what we've heard, and the engagement to date, which a number of the things that you're asking about will be in there. And I'm happy to have a further conversation with you about this and get you on the list to be involved as we go through the process.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. No,
Okay,
thank you,
very much.
Marianne. Appreciate that. And yeah, I think really important to note that that OCP process is ongoing. And so now really is the time to have input into that process and what you want to see and not see in our community.
Yes, and that my concern is that I see that there's a lot of things that are getting adopted and just shoved in because it's going so fast. Things are going so fast right now. Different policies are changing really, really fast before people even know what's going on. I'm not just talking about here, I'm talking about everywhere. And I just want to be assured that we are going to get a chance to even know what's going on before it is actually adopted into knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
Because I completely disagree, I don't completely disagree with the 15-minute city, but I completely disagree with the fact of having digital carbon and us being tracked that way.
Yeah, and that's not a concept that is being considered in this community, but certainly improved walkability and health indicators as a result of some of the statistics that are out there for our community. So ways to build a healthy, safe community are always top of mind for us. I would just stress again that the most important, document for guiding our community forward and what we will and will not do and how we will move forward in planning is that official community plan. So it really is like this, our OCP has not been redone in I think 12 or 15 years, so it is dated. Things are happening quickly right now, and the world has changed really quickly, and communities and everyone is trying to move quickly to adapt. But this plan is really critical, and so encouraging yourself and people to come out and have input into it is very important. So the website that Marianne mentioned is letsconnectpa.ca, and it's got all of the timelines for different engagements and multiple different ways for you to connect as a part of that as well.
Is this all going to be somewhere where I can read this back so I don't have to write everything that you just said down?
Yes, this meeting is, so this and all of our meetings are actually on our YouTube channel, City of Port Alberni Local Government, and they're stored on there permanently, so you can go and rewatch anytime.
Excellent. And then so, just one more, sorry. You said that this we do not want to do the carbon tax thing, and that is not your goal at this time.
Yeah, we don't actually have legislative authority to create new taxes as a municipal government, so not something that would be within our realm of ability or scope.
So if the provincial government says that you have to, will you just, or do you get to have a choice?
No, we don't have the ability to collect that type of tax, provincial and federal government only, so we would not be a part of that.
Right on, I still get steak. Okay, thank you very much for your thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Michael, I was wondering if you get open, if you could send us an invitation so we could come and have a tour of your makerspace.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from
Sorry, I'm
council? Seeing none.
going to respond to that. No, by all means, everyone is invited. So our hope is once the makerspace has finally received its business license, that we'll be able to put together a public info session, and obviously I would encourage council to come down and check it out and take a look around at the space, see what some of the services we'll be offering. Councillor Douglas and Councillor Dame have both already beat you guys to the punch. So there's a few of the other ones here that I would love to see down at the space. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Just a comment there, Michael. I know you've been talking about this for a long time, so I'm looking forward to seeing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patola, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. With that, then would somebody like to move adjournment?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.